You had some good time connecting with the peers. Now we're going to move on to our next session and our first panel of today. So the topic of the panel is AI for Education, Transforming Learning Environment. And I'm going to pass this to our moderator, Dr. Zheng Yuan.
Morning, everyone. Thanks, Joshua. Welcome to our panel. My name is Zheng Yuan. I'm assistant professor at King's College London. Today, this morning, we already have two amazing live talks set in the context, for AI in education. So at this panel, we are going to exploring the rapidly evolving role of AI in education, from transforming assessments to reshaping learning experiences. AI is fundamentally changing the way we teach, learn, and prepare for the future. Today, at this session, we have an incredible lineup of experts. Let me introduce our panelists. We have Dr. Lei Shi, Associate Professor from Newcastle University. We also have Dr. MPhil, Senior Researcher and Data Scientist from the British Council. And here we have Dr. Diana Galvan-Souza, Research Associate at the University of Cambridge. Last but not least, we have Graham C., Senior Research Manager at Cambridge University Press and Assessment. Each of our panelists will share their thoughts on various aspects of AI in education. First, I would like to invite our panelists to briefly introduce themselves.
Okay, I'll make a start. Hello everyone, good morning. I'm Lei Shi. I'm also the professor in Newcastle University. I sit in the human-computer interaction group, but I also do a lot of machine learning recommender system, especially for education. I'm so honored to be here to be on the panel, and I'm glad to see that I already know some of you, and I see there's a diverse background of yourself, and I really enjoy the debate and the discussion and questions so far. I hope you enjoy the day, and that's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, so next. My name is MPhil. I'm a senior researcher and data scientist at the British Council. I'm part of the English language research group, where we do work on how to use AI and natural language processing to support assessment. So basically how we can use these technologies for exams, for example. And also I lead the strategy for digital products as well, and provide oversight and AI literacy. I do a lot of dissemination as well. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Diana, and I'm currently a research associate at the University of Cambridge at the APTA group, which is focused on educational applications of NLP. And although my current affiliation is with Cambridge, I am also actively collaborating with my previous lab, which is Tohoku University in Japan. And my current research has to do with feedback generation, but I also still work with I'm very active on my previous research topic, which is related to reasoning.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Graham, and I'm a Senior Research Manager at Cambridge University Press and Assessment. So we specifically look at the learning and the assessment of English as a foreign or additional language, and that is my background, and I think I come in from a slightly different perspective. So my background is in EFL education. I then moved into EFL assessment, and through my work in the last 5 years, that has various touch points with AI. And what we've been looking at is how we can then incorporate AI into the learning and assessment products that we oversee and the research that we do, and also how to disseminate that information and knowledge to learners and teachers across the whole world, specifically about English language.
Thanks all our panelists. Okay, let's get started. Let's first dive into our first theme, large language models, LLMs, and their impact on education. As we all know, LLMs like ChatGPT are transforming educational tools and applications. They are revolutionizing how we approach assessment, teaching, and the creation of learning or assessment content. Okay, so Dr. Lei Shi, could you start us off by sharing your thoughts on how LLMs are transforming educational tools and applications?
Okay, I can firstly share my own experience because when ChatGPT came out, we are all crazy about it. We tried what it can do. And in my own work practices, I also use ChatGPT for the assessment, for sometimes writing my comment for student work, which works really well. And I see also a lot of students start using ChatGPT in all different, I would say, sometimes very creative way of using it. I also learn a lot from my students as well. So I would say ChatGPT, when it comes out, especially more broadly, generative AI, is kind of conversational AI, which means it's quite responsive. You can get immediate feedback. But then there are a lot of issues, obviously, as we can already experience, like they are super maybe overconfident. When they produce some text, they believe they say the same thing. They say very accurate thing, but actually not. Sometimes there's a lot of lack of references, lack of reasoning, which is the main challenge here. But I am also quite optimistic. I think this will go to in a very right way, so it can help us definitely in teaching and learning space.
Thank you for sharing your personal experience and also your insightful perspective. Dr. Marian Felice, building on what Dr. Shi just shared, could you also tell us how LLMs are impacting assessment practice specifically?
Sure. So, well, LLMs are being used for a myriad of things. As was just mentioned, feedback is one of the main aspects. So that contributes in lots of products, or also for self-learning. Also, we can use LLMs to create content for content generation. That's being used a lot as well. Also for certain specific aspects of assessment, like things that are more abstract to assess, you can rely on an LLM as well. But you have to be very, very conscious of the limitations, of course. Also for the validity of exams. So to double check whether some grammatical structure, some language is appropriate for the level that you're targeting in a product. So there are lots of different ways in which LLMs are being used at the moment. But as I said, I think you have to have a very critical point of view as well. So I'm sure you guys also have your own perspectives, especially I believe Graham, you might have something to say as well from what Cambridge is doing.
Yeah.
Can I take it? Yeah. I mean, Mariana, I think a lot of what you said resonates with what we are doing in Cambridge and the things that we are trying out, the preliminary research that we've done into how we can use LLMs in content generation. And by that, again, we're looking at language tests. So we're thinking about how do we generate the reading texts and the listening texts that we might use and put in front of a candidate. How do we generate the questions that relate to those texts? And we've done some research and it's been quite positive, but we do also build on our own expertise that we've been around for 100 years, and obviously exams were very different 100 years ago, but we have that cumulative knowledge and we can see what things like ChatGPT is producing when it produces a multiple choice question, for example, does that match up with our expertise? How well does it do that? We've been doing different research. I don't know, for example, is a zero-shot or a few-shot approach better? And those sorts of things. So we can see that actually it can have a lot of positive benefits for creating the assessments ourselves. And then I guess a separate side of it is how do our learners, our candidates and teachers interact with AI in the work that we do as well. So that goes back to your point about feedback as well. What sort of feedback can we give students, particularly when it's low stakes assessment or learning oriented assessment? The more personalised feedback that we can give them will obviously help their better learning of their language in the future.
Thank you. I do have a follow-up question. So I know that the British Council and Cambridge University Press and Assessment, they are behind all the high-stake assessment like IELTS, like FCE. You also mentioned that there are lots of preliminary research you are currently looking at how you can use the LLMs to help better learning and also assessment. From your point of view, what do you think are the biggest challenges of using LLMs in these high-stake assessments?
Do you want to take that first?
All right. I think it is right to point out different stakes, actually. So I just mentioned the arguably lower stakes scenarios when you're in a classroom. It's not super important that they don't cheat or things like that. And contrast that with what you just said, Zheng, about very high stakes language assessments. You mentioned IELTS as an example, where the result that a candidate gets means that they might get a visa to go to another country and work, or they might not. So it is very high stakes. And I think it is right to call out those distinctions, because those high stakes language assessments do require very high level of security, integrity, to make sure the candidate is showing their own ability, not cheating in any way. And also, from a validity point of view that you mentioned earlier, we, as a test provider, we need to show that our tests are good, are fit for purpose, are accurate, are reliable, and we have to prove that to regulators. Often these are, for example, the visa immigration authorities. They want to be absolutely confident that our assessments do what we say that they do. And when it comes to high-stakes assessments and the use of LLMs, I don't think we are there yet. That's for a lot of reasons. I think the black box nature of how we are using LLMs currently means obviously it's not explainable, and that poses a particular challenge when we're trying to get regulators to accept our exams, for example. So I do think it's a huge challenge for those high-stakes assessments, particularly in the language field that I'm associated with. I don't think we're there yet. There's a lot of work to be done, but I think the work that we are doing in let's say, lower stakes assessments, at some point in the future, will provide a way to getting there. Mariana, what's your experience? Is that the same or different?
No, I agree with you, and I think the distinction between low and high stakes is crucial. And also, I think I'd like to add that when you're using LLMs for assessment, you are delegating your expertise to a machine, basically, and that's something that we don't want to do. We want to be in control of what we are assessing. So that's why we don't delegate, assessment fully to a machine. And also, I think I have to mention things like the EU AI Act. They actually forbid the use of fully automated systems for high-stakes scenarios if there's no human supervision. So, as Graham mentioned, so far our use of LLMs is for low-stakes, mid-stakes scenarios. So, that's a crucial distinction.
But also, sorry, just very briefly, obviously there are lots of other types of AI, as we all well know, and so we are using sort of more basic predictive forms of AI in auto marking and things like that, as I'm sure you're all doing as well, and Deanna, you well know about. And so let's not forget about AI completely, but there are more explainable ways that we can do this.
Yeah, but even in those cases, you wouldn't use it in an unsupervised fashion for high stakes exams.
No, absolutely not. And you can build in confidence intervals and things like that to try and evaluate how reliable and appropriate your assessment is. But I completely agree with you. For those higher stakes exams, you want to be fully valid and explainable. And at the moment, we just can't do that.
Can I add that? I think this is more of, if we think about it, we need this so-called human-in-the-loop approach, which means we have co-decision making this decision together. Because we are talking about AI making mistakes, but also us human beings, we also make mistakes. So how can we learn from each other? How do we use AI tools to augment our capability to help make a better decision? That will be a better approach. And I think also like generative AI and also a lot of like ChatGPT, these tools are still in a very early stage. And also we need to somehow make it more contextualized. Maybe fine-tune the model to fit the purpose. Like if this exam, if this is assessment, high-stake assessment, what can we do? Can we do something to make the AI model better, more critical, more explainable? And how can we also do this? Like it's really collaborative, multidisciplinary effort because we need student feedback, we need teachers' feedback, we need psychologists, we need lawyers' legislation, right? So to work together to make these tools better, useful for the social good.
Thanks. I think that's really interesting, and also like your point actually reminds me one of the rationales and of the motivations why in the first place we started, like researchers and practitioners started to work on auto marking. Because like humans can make errors and like the human raters, because of the subjectivity and because of the rate of fatigue. So that's why people think that maybe we should have a more objective like machine or system that will never they will never be tired, things like that. But I completely agree with you that for LLMs and ChatGPT, it's still in the early stages. There are lots of like unknown. And so maybe it's safer not to deploy that for high-stake assessment, at least now. And it's also kind of like a relief for us, right? We know that. But these very important like high-stake assessment exams, like you are not just using ChatGPT, like who still not fully understand. Graham, you mentioned about explainability. That's kind of like the issues people mentioned about all these black box LLMs. Deanna, because I know your background is more on like NLP, on the academia, on the research side. What do you think about
about explainability?
Yeah, and also like the difference between like the LLMs or what like Graham mentioned, more traditional, like explainable, like models that has been already used in education or assessment?
Well, I feel like one of the biggest impacts of generative AI is the accessibility. I feel like it definitely made, like one of the biggest changes that we're seeing in NLP is that I feel like these kind of models, like maybe for the average person, they seem like new, but we as NLP researchers, we know that they're not new, right? So we've been playing with this for a very long time, or at least for quite a few years now. But that was the point where like the ones playing with AI and these models were only you, like NLP researchers, right? Like NLP practitioners. So yeah, like the main breakthrough is accessibility. Like now with LLMs, is like anybody. Like yeah, I think it's a good thing that anybody can use it because, for example, I think that has allowed, then again, not only NLP researchers like doing like research on NLP with that. Like for example, I've seen like lately there's been an increase people from other fields, like people from education, like teachers, and some doing their own user studies, like implementing their own prompts, and like in a very real scenario, which I think is very interesting, and it gives us like a lot of new insight, which I think is something good. I think our main concern in NLP, not only as a researcher, but also as a user, as Mariano pointed out. So what he said, that we should still be critical. So I think, then again, like as researchers, since maybe because we have a better idea of like how these models are developed, how a model is trained, where the data comes from, right? Like we tend to be like more familiar with, okay, like whenever we reach something, we're always looking at, okay, yes, this model has a very good performance on a data set, right? But we already are asking ourselves, right? Okay, what about the architecture of the model? Where is the data? What about the data that they use for training, right? We don't only look at a number. We're trained for doing that, right? But then again, the average person, no, like if we come, like people from OpenAI come and say like, oh, this, my model is very good at common sense reasoning, right? And they show 80% accuracy on some benchmark, right? And then again, maybe this doesn't impress any of us, or not so much, right? Because we know how things work, right? So, and in terms of explainability, so I think like now, so now the challenge is kind of like, in general, language generation, I would like to point out, or to remind people that language generation is one of the hardest tasks, if not the hardest task in language, and not only for a computer, even for humans. So language generation used to be a very hard task, then again, now it became easier to generate text, right? But now the challenge is evaluating the quality of that text, right? Like regardless of the task, and like the end task in which you are using the model. So I think that, so then again, going back to my point is that what Mariano was saying, like this is why we need to stay critical. Yes, I don't want to disqualify, like if you see a high performance on a task, that is good, but then again, you need to still look at the text, right? And in terms of assessment, also I think we also need to remember, like in the cycle of assessment, we have on one hand maybe marking, like just grading, like maybe you can take an exam, and one part of the assessment is just saying, okay, from a scale from 1 to 10, you got an 8, right? So that's just the marking part, right? But then maybe the feedback part is telling you why did you get an 8, right? Rather than a 10, right? And what do you need in order to get a 10, right? What do you need in order to improve? That's usually the job of a teacher, right? Identifying what happened, which I think is related. I don't remember if our two keynote speakers mentioned the difference between product and process, right? So now, then again, we are like looking more at the process. Generative AI is like allowing us to take a look at that, but then again, we need to be very careful. Just because a model can generate an explanation, it doesn't mean the explanation is good, right? And I think that is the main concern in NLP.
Okay, in terms of when we're talking about the explanation, I think there has been a lot of research, even you can find a couple of papers about the analytics, where we analyze, for example, user data in online learning systems, try to find the patterns of student behavior, how to learn along the course, and the realization, we also call it open student modeling or open user modeling, where we realize these patterns for the teachers, for the students themselves to see what happened and then make their own decisions. But I think what's really important is, even though, yes, we can show what happened in the system, but can the users, the students, the teachers, or even the parents, they understand, they can use this realization. I guess that's another debate about AI literacy. So how can we have a society where a lot of people we know, maybe we take this as a common knowledge. Everyone knows AI. Everyone knows how to use this kind of technology. I guess it's quite important to build this AI literacy in the curriculum from different stages of in the educational systems.
Before we move on to the next topic, I would also like to open the floor to our audience. So please feel free to ask questions or share your thoughts.
Thank you very much for the discussion so far. I was thinking in terms of assessment, because you were talking about assessment and making sure that there's no AI presence in it. Do you see, or do you think it will shift in the future? I'm thinking in terms of students coming and taking the TOEFL exam or equivalent, and what you want from them. Okay, if they have to talk about things, then you want, of course, them to be able to use the language. But if they're writing something, and if what they're creating is based on ChatGPT or other large language models, and then later on when they're actually studying, they're going to use the same tools, in the end, wouldn't it be more natural to just evaluate the quality of that output and see, can they produce something that makes sense in that specific context? It's a bit of a challenging question, sorry.
No, I mean, I completely agree with that on the one hand. So I think there are two things here. The first is authenticity. What skills, what language skills are actually needed for someone to do an undergraduate course, for example? And ideally, those are the sorts of language skills that we would want to put in our tests in order to be authentic as you can be in a test, in order to prepare the person for real life in the university. So we, as a testing body, have to listen to what universities say that they want their students to do, and see what university students are doing. I'm using this particular context of university students, but it might apply to doctors or, whichever person needs to take a language test. So that is a responsibility on our part. And so far, up until a year ago or so, 2 years ago, the requirement was for undergraduate and postgraduate students to be able to write essays, and so therefore that's naturally what we have tried to put into our test. Now, I agree, as time moves on, it may be the case that the skills that students need in order to start a university course will be different. And in which case, we have to respond to that as a testing organisation and make sure that we are still being authentic and relevant. And so it may be in the future that the tasks in our test change. It may be that we don't have a formal write an essay question, because that's no longer what happens in universities. And so when it's the case that that doesn't happen in universities, then absolutely we need to look at that and change our tests. And of course, that's not to say that we're not thinking about the possibilities of what might be happening in the next decade or however long. And so we are thinking about, well, what is the future of assessment, language assessment specifically? Probably, possibly, there is going to be a greater influence of oral skills and less of writing skills, of being able to use AI effectively to do whatever is needed. Maybe it's a greater influence of presentation skills. So there are lots of different possibilities, and I think obviously we are going to be thinking about that and continuing to be thinking about that, but we're also looking at the reality of what do university students, as the example, what do they need to do, and we try to replicate that in our language test. I'm sorry, that was quite a long answer. Mariana, do you have anything to add to that?
So I think it depends on the context, really. So there's a huge debate among linguists and assessment experts of whether by allowing people to use tools such as an LLM, the construct that you're measuring changes, because then we're not talking about then measuring somebody's ability to write or express themselves in English, but then we're talking about their ability to use a tool, an AI tool. So maybe we're talking about life skills instead, which is, a valid construct as well, but this is not what we do when we talk about language assessment. And also I think I have to mention that in the context of assessing English as a second language, for certification purposes, we obviously don't allow this because, as I said, the very construct that we're measuring is somebody's ability to express themselves in a second language. So if you think about it, I mean, we definitely need to make sure that these people can express themselves in the language that we're certifying. So think of a circumstance where they wouldn't have access to these AI tools, like a nurse in an operating theatre. So these people we have to make absolutely sure that they understand and can communicate in the language that they were certifying. So I think that's the main reason why sometimes we don't allow the use of these tools. But in a completely different context, like, I don't know, maybe, needing help to finish an essay, that might be valid if that's how you're going to use it in the future in your profession. But I think we have to be aware of the context.
Sure, I don't think that this will change actually that fast. It was more of a challenging question. And I think, for instance, you're yet changing things like spelling, right? And everybody nowadays is using spelling tools, but nevertheless, I don't think that you remove that requirement from your tests yet. So I think probably actually it will take much longer, but that might be interesting to discuss.
I have two questions. One is about, you just mentioned that we may use some kind of assessment and also AI tools be used in language learning process. Like some adaptive software like Duolingo is very useful, but do you think there's any big risk or any potential risk for students that maybe influence their ability in most contexts?
Well, I think one of the reasons why whenever I get to speak, I highlight why the multidisciplinarity of our field is so important, is because I think in cases like Duolingo, in learning in general, I feel like there are different attitudes, right? So for example, I think Duolingo was not meant to be used in your, like for example, it's not a tool that is going to prepare you for an IELTS exam, for example, like for an academic English, right? So I think Duolingo is a great tool if you want to get started in the language, right? So in language learning, there are different stages, for example, right? So the very basic stage is building vocabulary and learning the new grammar rules, right? So when you're at that stage, it is good, right? So why? Because, and then again we go back to gamification, because I think it's easier to learn vocabulary by playing a game rather than the traditional way of, I remember when I was learning English, they gave me a list of verbs, regular and irregular, and I get to memorize it, and I hated it. It was quite not engaging, right? But then again, I think Duolingo, I think it's not meant for that, right? So I think if the attitude of the learner is on the user side, that's my point. So there's so much that can be on the app, and maybe what needs to happen is that these apps need to be a little bit more open about that. Duolingo is going to get you started with a language, right? But for example, in my case, I'm using Duolingo for French, so I speak Japanese, and I am a native Spanish speaker. I wouldn't have used Duolingo for Japanese. Why? Because I think one of the main challenges of Japanese, again, as a native Spanish speaker, it was not so much, in order to speak Japanese fluently, my main challenge was not learning vocabulary or learning grammar rules, which I did. I'm good at memorizing stuff. And when I was learning Japanese, I got to the point I was very good with that, but I was not able to write a single sentence or speak Japanese. Why? Because then again, it needs another shift, right? So, but with French is very similar to Spanish, right? For me, it makes sense because I don't need actually to learn many new things if I want to speak French, because it's just pretty much in my case, again, as a native Spanish speaker, it's pretty much about building vocabulary. Grammar is pretty much the same, and maybe pronunciation, which I find very helpful in the app, because then I can talk to the app, right? And it kind of it gives me feedback in the sense that if it is correct, I can assume that I'm pronouncing it correct, right? So I think the risk is not so much on how, it's more about how the learner takes it. So and I think it's Mariana, the one who's like been talking about limitations. We need to understand the limitations. But then again, maybe what is happening is that as researchers and people involved in the field, we're more critical, and for us, like, we are more aware of the limitations of technology. But then again, an average user maybe is not. So maybe what needs to happen is, I don't know, maybe Duolingo in this case, as in your example, needs to be more open about it, right? Like, yes, like if you're using Duolingo, probably if you want to write an essay in the target language, maybe Duolingo is not actually going to help you, right? And it's not, it doesn't mean that Duolingo is not useful. Right? It was not meant to be used in that way. It was not the purpose of the tool. Does that answer your question?
Thank you very much. Another question is about Dr. Lei Shi just mentioned, like, researchers knows that this is not a new industry field, but maybe public people still have concerns and worries about the use of AI in education. In this case, what do you think maybe the researchers or the students, teachers could do to kind of limit public concerns?
Okay, I can answer the question. I mean, in my mind, it's always been like a collaborative effort, because like me, as a researcher, university staff, I'm only one piece of the puzzle, and there are other people from the industry, from the parents who are underserved communities. They know they have their own expertise, they have their own knowledge. So I guess it must be a collaborative effort. So we should work together. So we kind of also, like a presentation like this, we share our ideas to make sure our people, everyone knows things are happening, and it can be useful, it can also be challenging. And also we have to have this legislation get involved to make sure that like assessment powered by AI is fair, is transparent, and also things about accountability. What if something bad happens? So people can be ensured that it's okay. Yeah, it's not perfect, but it's okay. You can use it. I also think about cars running in the street. Initially, people would criticize, oh, it's so dangerous, it runs so fast. It's not safe, and it's ruined the original system, like horses are running in the street. Now we are using cars, so people are so scared. But now we don't talk about the cars danger, because it's just our normal life. So I believe someday AI will be embedded in our life, in our society. People can just treat it as like now we don't question how we get electricity. We don't question why it's like we can cook using fire, right? So it should be embedded in our human history. And later on, I guess life will be easier. And in the next generation, there will be something new, more challenging. So we forget about all the debates today about AI, the use of AI in our life, because it just happened, right?
Thank you very much.
Can I just quickly pick up on that? I think there's still a place, isn't there, because you still educate very young children about safety on the road, for example. But you're absolutely right that we assume that knowledge about safety with AI and ethics in AI and those sorts of issues will become familiar over time. But as we all know, as we've just said, that to the general public, it is still relatively new. And we have a role in educating them, in training them. And I do believe you mentioned that it's important to have collaboration between academic researchers and the practitioners and the teachers. So we do have that role to play. And I do think, like British Council, Cambridge University Press and Assessment are two examples of bodies that have that link between academic researchers and the practitioners on the ground, the teachers and the learners as well. So we can have that responsibility. I believe we should have that responsibility. We do have that responsibility to educate or to train in whatever way we think resonates best with our learners and teachers. And that might be webinars, and it might be papers that we put out in accessible language that people can understand. And so when we sell a product, when we say that, yeah, we think you should take this test, it also comes with like a health warning saying this uses AI, it uses AI in this way, or for example, we think AI can be useful in teaching, but here are some things that you might want to consider. And we do that now, and probably British Council does as well. So, yeah, we have that role to play.
Can I add something else? I think, so for me, Duolingo specifically, I was quite shocked that, I mean, normally university admissions should be very serious, right? But I know that now a lot of universities, especially during the COVID-19 period, it's not possible to take those exams in person. So they decided, a lot of top universities decided to use Duolingo for their administration. I was shocked, but it's happening. So my point is, and also, it's nothing is perfect. No matter how much effort you put in your work, people complain. Your assessment is not fair. It's not usable. So, for example, for myself, I could get a very high score in the English exam. But when I first arrived in the UK, I don't understand anything. Like, what's happening, right? So I would say, okay, is your assessment useful? I get a higher score, but why can't I use in life? Also, like text, English text, what's the purpose of it? Is it help international students to have a normal life here, or help them in study in the university? But I guess it's too difficult because there are so many disciplines. How can you make sure students are having good enough English to study like computer science? And also, I observe people, a lot of people, especially now with this ChatGPT thing, in the classroom, students using these translators immediately get translations. So my point is like, do we even need another language, if we get technology help? And we can criticize, oh, why don't you have good enough English before you come here? But hey, they are coming here for learning computer science, not English. Why do they bother? Also, maybe they are just here for a year and they go back to no matter where they came from. So it's not that useful, right? So also, I believe, now people, university accept Duolingo, and at some point, I mean, maybe your job is replaced, then your job does not exist in the future. That's also possible. Yeah, so yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that sounded like a threat. It was a threat. But can we respond to that?
Go for it.
Yeah, I think, as Mariana said, context is important and communication is important. And it is a challenge, and we are never going to do that perfectly, as you rightly said, but that is our challenge. It comes back to your point earlier. How do we make authentic, useful, relevant learning and assessment materials?
And valid.
And valid, thank you.
Well, can I just say something before? I feel like talking about the context, and I think then again, because we are so familiar with it, because we work on it, we research it. For example, in your case, we're specifically talking about language assessment, right? And then again, what do you assess in language, right? And I think it's useful to point out, like when you're learning a new language, there are like different levels, dimensions in which. So, for example, then again, the very basic level is vocabulary, right? So if we look at it from like things from linguistics or things like that, so my point is like there's a huge difference between, because one keyword that you mentioned was understanding, and assessing understanding is different than assessing, for example, just vocabulary, which is understanding, but then again, in terms of linguistics, that's discourse level things rather than vocabulary or grammar. Right, so I feel like this is another thing that I would like to make explicit. Like there are different levels of assessment, in particular in language assessment. Then again, like you can go from vocabulary, grammar rules, things that you can memorize. But then again, like how do you evaluate? How do you decide that someone is proficient in a language? It's more towards the part of the understanding of the target language.
Absolutely, and that was going to be my point about communication. That a test of grammar or a test of vocab is not a test of communication, and it's arguably useless. It's can you use that grammar and that vocabulary in a communicative context? And that's what you're really wanting to test if you're trying to be authentic and useful. And then going forward is how do we continue to test a communicative, authentic, valid way in the future in a world that's changing. So absolutely, any test that you see which are just grammar and vocab may be okay in certain contexts, but for general, can you communicate, can you understand, can you disseminate meaning, it's not that useful.
Yeah, I just want to add that in general, so language is a tool for communication. So any language that we're talking about, my native language is Spanish, but then and I learned English and I learned Japanese. Then I like the example for me, the example with Japanese is better than learning English, because what made Japanese so hard for me was it was not memorizing stuff. It was not memorizing vocabulary, grammar rules. It was, in the end, also since language is a tool for communication, and also something that our keynote speakers mentioned is our perception of the world. So then again, this is how everything is connected. How we communicate, and one of the very basic mistakes of learners is we tend to translate from our source language to the target language, right? And in my case, maybe when I was trying to translate from what I will say in a particular situation from Spanish to English, I didn't make a lot of mistakes, because in the way that we perceive the world, how native English speakers and native Spanish speakers we see the world, how we express our ideas, is not so different. How Japanese people express themselves, specifically about, and my example is always emotions, because also then again, language is an expression of our own culture. Latin American culture, like Hispanics, we are very expressive, which is the complete opposite of the Japanese culture. So for example, when it comes about love, it's not that there is not a word to say, I love you, or a phrase, it's that they wouldn't say it. But that it doesn't mean that they don't express love. It's just that if you want to translate I love you, then again you go to the dictionary and you're going to find a translation. But then again, someone is not going to sound fluent. You're not going to say like a native speaker. Why? Because then again, in the way that they use their language in order to communicate is not that. And then again, that's how you go from vocabulary, rules, and then actually communicating an idea.
So maybe that addresses your concern, or your view of whether we still need to learn a language if we just have tools to translate. So maybe the human cultural component needs to be there.
I think we have this debate only because we are in a stage where AI is not good enough. Can you imagine someday it's just impossible for us to tell the difference between human and AI?
But even if you were capable to have a perfect machine that would translate perfectly, would you like to use that in every single context?
We don't even say they are machine, we are human being, because it's just imagine sometimes later our body we are human race, right? There are some chips embedded in our body, something in our mind. After I died, I upload my mind side into a cloud, and there's another robot replace my physical body living there. Can you say that's not real people? Isn't me? Isn't the future me, right? Then, do you know I'm a robot now, or I'm a human being? So
I feel like in Black Mirror now.
And now, we set up sexuality differences was like if you're gay, you are sick, right? But now people, we are equal. Then we fight for equality, for gender, for different age, race, and sexuality, for example. And later on, I guess there will be fighting about the right between human and the robots, and then they may have equal rights with you. And then if you cannot even tell the difference from yourself and the robot, doesn't really matter.
I think that the takeaway message for me is that, let's look at the positive of it, is the thinking about EDI, thinking about equality, diversity, and inclusion. So I think this just illustrates why we need to think about these aspects as well.
Yes, of course, because we are in this stage of AI development. We didn't talk about the EDI in the past, the last decade. It's only recent few years, right? And I believe it will go away. People will never talk about the EDI ever again. Sometime later.
Why? Because it will be solved?
It's not, we don't know what's going to happen. It's unknown world. Maybe it's just not necessary, or people we are in our gene is embedded in our gene already. So a quick example, like my mother, I don't know if she was just pushing me to have a kid or what. She sometimes tell me story. Okay, I have a good friend. His grandson is so smart. He can use. He's only 1 year old. He knows how to play iPad. Nobody teach them. So is that like a revolution of human being? Is it like something embedded in our gene already? So we don't know. Sometimes maybe we have memories when we have a new baby. This memory maybe can go to the next generation, things like that. So it happens. So I believe like sometimes new topics coming up, we have to debate. We have to care about EDI, for example, and sometime later it will go away, and new debates will come. People will be busy with some other debates.
Well, hopefully cultural diversity will not go away.
Okay, so that.
Can I just add something? And then again, like the word assessment is a very broad term, and I think if you haven't picked up from everything that we've been discussing, there are like key elements that you need to. Then, if we're talking about language learning, there are things that you can assess, right? Like vocabulary knowledge, grammar knowledge, or things like that. But also, then assessment is like similar to evaluation, right? In the end, you're evaluating something. And also, then again, when it comes to language in general, one thing that you can assess, or that we're trying to figure out how to assess, is how the understanding, right? So, which is, and I think another keyword that you mentioned is like, there were many things that you say that you don't know. It's hard to measure, right?
Yeah.
Like that, like just being the fact that you are aware of the things that you know and you don't know, right? Like, so understanding is something very hard to measure. In NLP, you're going to find that there are several metrics, but there are like things that still, like how do you measure how much knowledge somebody? There's a difference between knowledge and there's a difference between understanding. Like reasoning implies having knowledge, but knowledge is like having like facts. But then again, so reasoning is, okay, you have the knowledge on one part, and then it's how you are able to make the association between like those pieces of knowledge. Sometimes, for example, you're going to like find that, not even with LLMs, let's say agents, whether it is an AI agent or a human, because we cannot claim that every human is smart in a certain way, right? Like somebody might have knowledge of something, but then when they speak and how they associate that knowledge is what hints their understanding of a topic, right? But then again, how do you measure it is the challenge. In NLP is still something unsolved. Well, my point is that there are like different things that we could be assessing, right? So maybe on one hand, there are things that are, since by nature there are things that are like something that we can quantify, we can observe, we can measure them, we can assess them. There are other things that are more abstract, right? So those are the things that we're still trying to figure out how to assess.
Interesting time. Any other?
Thanks for all the insights and wonderful debates from all our today's presenter today. It's a very interesting talk. I enjoyed a lot. So actually, I don't have any questions. I do have some personal experience to share regarding to all the topics we debate just now. So because I think Dr. Leishi talking about it's very hard for if we advance our technology, for example, we train the models more better, and also we use human in the loop in a more better way, it can actually achieving a better, for example, assessment of the interactions and also achieving the better goal of the language assessment. I largely agree with that because based on my own experience in my previous research works, we actually design a very more interactional-based text autonomy. For example, we looking at a lot of things for topic management and also whether we can choose the social role presentations very appropriately or not in the English non-native speaking data sets. And within all these data sets and our design text features and all this autonomy, we're able to beat a lot of these variabilities and also personal bias brought by the human raters. For example, some of the data sets we use are like peer-to-peer speakings and also the role plays. So based on all these data sets, a lot of things can be eliminated and largely improved. And even the agreement with the automated assessment, our system can even beat the human raters in a lot of perspectives. So I largely support on that. And I believe in future industrial that will definitely be a future direction, like how we can actually brought a more authentic settings and how to actually brought in all these fine-grained text autonomy in all these automatic speaking, especially for the non-native speakers, and how we can better help non-native speakers to improve their actual interactional abilities and how to actually improve their communicative abilities in that. So yeah, if all the speakers like, we really would like to have more collaborations and talkings after our today's talk.
Hi guys, I was just thinking about when you were talking about using AI to monitor critical assessments, and I definitely agree that you want to have something explainable. I was thinking and extending critical assessments back to things like university entrance exams or stuff that's going to be important. I'm thinking back to times when people would need something to be regraded, for example, because the assessors, especially for a more subjective topic, would be biased, or maybe they're having a bad day, or there's some kind of thing. I'm wondering, my question is it a better, at this stage, is it a better kind of use of AI to monitor as human assessors at scale to create a fairer kind of assessment system? Is that something that we're doing already?
Yeah. We're definitely looking into that. We can see how, obviously we can get a human mark and we can get an auto mark. We can also use AI to evaluate the performance of the humans and compare human against human, human one on Monday versus human one on Tuesday. All of those sorts of stats we can look at. And so currently we're looking at models. What gives us the most accurate result, fundamentally, using all of that sort of data that we're gathering. So, yeah. It will get better over time, I'm sure.
Okay, so we can see he's using our data to do their experiment. I'm actually on your side because I'm also a human being, right? I think when you talk about bias, obviously there are human bias because we are human, we have emotions, right? There are also bias in AI because they are trained using some data, right? Yes. Then we have to, because they are not good enough, we have to combine each other's expertise, knowledge to co-decision making, right?
Definitely. And we all know, I'm sure, about the biases that exist within LLMs, especially because we don't know about it. So that is one reason why we would never at the moment just take the AI result or the auto mark. We've got to be super confident and super sure about it.
But also, if we use AI, we have to give users an opportunity to question it. So, for example, if you are not happy with your result, you should be able to inquire why you got that result, and we should be able to provide an explanation. That's why explainable AI is so important. So what I mean by this is, even if you use technology, you still have to allow people to come to you if they have any questions or if they want to question the result. And in that case, you might decide, for example, to mark it, have it marked by a human, for example, and make sure if that the scores agree, or if they don't agree, then you provide a new result. This is the updated human marked result.
Yeah, I also want to add on that.
That was my question.
Yeah, I want to just follow up on on what you just said. Maybe we can do the other way around. So if we have like test sitter, the question mark, a human rater have assessed, maybe you can just ask the machine AI to reassess. because you said that you allow the students to question the mark provided by the AI, do you also allow students to question the mark marked by a human?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
always been the
That's
case.
always-
Yeah, when we never had AI, we always had that in order to try and limit any bias that might exist from one potential human rater. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, my point was that even if you move towards automating, the process of assessment, you still have to leave that door open.
For sure, yeah. I also want to mention that actually fairness in automated assessment is also a very trendy and hot topic in research areas. So there are researchers actually currently looking at the fairness issues in automated assessment. There are some previous work that have found out that there are some hidden biases in some of the models deployed by some very famous organizations or test takers. So for example, for the specific example of language assessment, they actually found out that some of the early version of the AI models might actually penalize students whose native language is actually a certain native language rather than other certain type of native language. So that is happening. And I think what Dr. Leishi just mentioned, I think that's also true. Think about all the AI models, how can we build, how did they build? We use the data with the human data to build the models. So for sure, there are also hidden biases. The biases can actually come from the data, or they can come from the algorithms, or they can come from the model training. So how to identify, detect all these biases, and then how we can actually remove these biases in all these systems is also very important. Okay. Any other questions or thoughts?
Yeah, hi. My name is Preeti, and I'm having the education and technology company. It's a EdTech company. And currently I'm writing a short proposal for Department of Education, which is very interesting. The proposal is aiming for T levels, which is for the age group of 16 to 19 years old. And basically the Department of Education is looking for somebody who can track the progress of the formative assessment, which is quite different because most of the people, they track the progress for the multiple choice questions. But here the use case is completely different, which is a formative assessment. And on top of that, they are also looking at formative assessment feedback, which is generated by Gen AI, but it should also intervene by the teacher. So it's basically a teacher's oversight. I'm writing the proposal, which is quite different in a sense that the subject which I'm handling is health and sciences. So basically science and technology, you can call it as. And within that, when the student submits the formative assessment answer paper, which is a freestyle of text. So it's a written text with the diagrams or a lot of information, and even the length of the response is quite long. So this is quite different use case because we are mostly handling the language models, and many people are making the assessments on the basis of English language, which is little straightforward as compared to the science and technology as the use case. Not just that, because there is a human intervention on the generated AI feedback. I'm quite concerned about the prompt engineering which is used by the teachers, because they might not be that used to giving the right prompts to get the right assessment checking. As you said that, as you have mentioned, Graham, you have mentioned that there are a lot of standards to make sure that the assessment generated are right up to the standards or not. Likewise, here also, if the teacher or the lecturer giving the wrong prompts, then the feedback might be wrong. So here there are two challenges which we are looking at. Number one is the generated feedback should be intervened by the teacher, and when the intervention is done, the prompt engineering need to be correct. And it's quite promising proposal, because I'm not sure about anybody has firstly scanned the freestyle text, which should be recognized by your LLM model, and then that need to be compared with the right mark scheme which teacher is providing, and all this process should be right on the spot, and at the end when teacher is intervening the feedback, the teacher should be knowing the correct prompt engineering. So there is a teacher training is also involved. I'm not sure whoever has worked on this formative style of free text feedback assessment.
Gosh, I think it's quite a challenge, isn't it? I mean, there's certainly a place for teacher training, generally speaking. How can teachers use Gen AI in the classroom? But then I think you're going a step further then in specifically training the teachers in prompt engineering, which is not as easy as people think it is it? And particularly in the case that you said. So I don't have a particular answer other than how can we, to ask the questions back to you, how can we train the teachers and what can we take away from the teachers? What can we or testing bodies do to do the prompt engineering for the teachers? Is there a way of doing that? I'm just posing those questions. I don't know, any of the other panelists want to respond to that?
Yeah, I think you have to be very careful about your experimental design. Maybe you want to standardize things like prompts. I think the communities of practice also work. So, having groups of teachers that they discuss among themselves what is the best way of generating feedback or changing feedback and so on. So maybe you want to do that before or as part of your experimental design.
Yeah, I have actually included the prompt engineering training in my proposal because as you have exactly said, that we need to train people who are not much aware about Gen AI, because not necessarily everybody is aware about Gen AI. We are coming from tech background, so we are quite familiar with what's the changes happening in the industry, and we get well aligned with that. But when we are thinking in teachers' point of view, they are more academically teaching the student. That's their meaning. I'm not sure if every teacher is aware about how to give the prompts, and that's why in my proposal I have included the prompt engineering training as well.
Can I just add something? I think also another suggestion that I would have is, so first of all, so it's not only learning, like giving prompt engineering training, since the LLMs are, and there's research that backs up that LLMs are very sensitive to how you write things in a prompt, then you need to be very specific in your proposal about what do you consider good feedback. Because in general, the concept of what is good and what is bad is not a general concept. It depends. It very depends on the context, right? And probably in a learning setting as well. So I think that's also a key step. You will need to be very specific in your particular case. What is it that you consider good? One of the challenges of LLMs is that, and I think this is also what Mariano mentioned, it's about control. In the end, the one way of controlling what the LLM generates is through the prompt. The prompt is telling the LLM somehow what to do. How the model generates text is another thing, and you don't have access to the inner workings of the LLM. Right? So then again, that's another limitation that you need to have in mind. And sometimes, then again, there's other research that has shown that your prompt can be very specific, it can be very long, and it has been shown that sometimes pretty much the LLM doesn't do what it was instructed to do. So also you need to be aware of, but at least the very least that you can do is that in your proposal you do define the specification of what you consider a good feedback.
Connected to that, I think when we are talking about the teacher training, especially for prompt engineering, it's just so difficult. So can we take another angle to say, okay, can we use generative AI to generate a prompt properly? So we can ease the workload of the teacher. I'm sure every teacher is super busy already. Now they have the actual work to learn prompt engineering again. Can they learn well? Do they have enough time? So can you think about can you do that automatically, ethically, considering all the legislation, ethical thing, to have a proper generation of the prompt?
No, I'm just only researching right now, so it's not.
I think maybe I can add on that. Like maybe you're already very familiar with the term prompt engineering. There's a new term which is called prompt optimization. So like what people like researchers have been doing in LP or in LLM is doing exactly what you just said. We try to have a algorithm or model that can automatically generate the best prompt like for each tasks and for each different language models. Because you probably know that they are all the available commercial or open source like language models, and maybe you figured out the amazing prompt that worked for ChatGPT, OpenAI's ChatGPT, GPT 3.5. It might not work for Google Gemini's language model, or it might not work for Mistral, or it might not work for other language models. So prompt optimization is just like people working on how to have the perfect prompt for different language models for different tasks. So maybe in the future, we don't need to worry about prompt engineering anymore. Okay, I know that there's still lots of interest from the audience, but I do like to, as we approach the end of the session, I do want to ask each of our panelists to share a brief concluding thought on the key takeaways from today's discussion, and also your thoughts on the future of AI in education.
I believe it's more of like a positive thing of using AI, although we should be careful because our human race may be diminished by AI at some point. The Earth may not exist. But anyway, I think it's very necessary, it's very critical that we keep this debate, this discussion, just keep doing this. And it's never ending, because there are always new things coming in, and all the things are a bit outdated, but we still have to remind people, like you said, how can you be safe in the street? We still have to educate our next generation. So yes, I hope we can keep this kind of debates and more people can get involved in, either from academic, from industry, from NGOs, from the government. Also, you are so important because you don't want so many crazy people have so many crazy ideas to destroy our society, right?
Okay, well, me next. So, yeah, I try to look at it positively, but also critically. I do believe that AI has the potential, it's been shown already, to make assessments and learning more interactive, multimodal, multilingual, more realistic, more genuine. And I think we're already slowly moving towards that kind of assessment. And I'm thinking that it will be particularly useful for productive skills, which is, I think, a gap that we still have to fill. So we've seen how we can use technology to expedite, the assessment of receptive skills, right? But what about productive skills like speaking and writing? And I think this is where AI will shine, hopefully, in the future.
Well, for me, hopefully the main takeaway was that there's a lot of room for improvement in NLP, and specifically in assessment. I think in many areas of NLP, but in assessment, there's still, we don't need to discard the progress that we have achieved with AI technology, but we also need to be very aware. But then again, as something that we have mentioned so many times is staying critical, being aware of the limitations, being aware of the challenges. So for me, that's the most important message. And of course, at some point we also talked about diversity, something that we didn't make explicit right now. But then again, most of the outcomes that we've been talking about come from research in English. And this is not the only, and we know that this is not the only language in the world, right? I mean, lately people are like paying more attention not only to what we call in NLP low resource languages, but even indigenous languages, for example, that in some communities exist, right? So then again, when you take the progress that you're seeing right now, my point is like we need to expand our view, and then again, this is about being critical, like how diverse language is, and that we are still like working towards a more diverse AI.
Great. I really agree with your two areas that you've highlighted there. So I just want to sort of repeat them basically. The first is about communication, letting teachers, learners, the general public know, make them more aware of both the benefits but also the challenges, the limitations that AI has at the moment. And I'm talking about sort of the AI that we're facing at the moment in the next couple of years, not longer term. So we have a challenge there to make sure that people outside our community are well aware of that sort of thing. And then your second point is about EDI, and I do want to pick up on that a bit more. I think that our two big things that we've been talking about in Cambridge is AI and EDI, and actually there's an opportunity to join those two things together. And I'm really pleased that you picked up on the fact that we've been concentrating a lot on English, and we have, because as everybody knows it's a big global language. But you're right to say, what about the other languages? What about, and something I'm particularly interested in, is how we often use more than one language at one time. So elements of what we call code switching, multilingualism. How can AI cope with that? I mean, at the moment, or certainly a year ago, it couldn't cope with that. You were either speaking in English or you weren't. How do we cope with the fact that actually people do just mix languages? And that's just one element of EDI. There are a whole host of other elements of EDI.
That's another panel talking about EDI, but yes, I think we should probably later discuss about that.
Absolutely. Also, I mean, I could go on and on, but you probably want me to stop.
A big thank you to our panelists for your time and your insights, and also to our audience for your participation. I just hope that the discussion we had today has provided food for thoughts on how AI is transforming education and how we can best harness its potential. I think we are perfectly at the time, and I also think the lunch is ready, so enjoy the food.
Thank you very much. So now we're gonna have a lunch session. We'll have 1 hour for lunch. The food is ready outside, so feel free to connect while enjoying the food. Thank you very much. We'll be back here at 2 o'clock sharp. Thank you.